Hello everyone, my name's Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT15, and BT15 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration on one of my favorite decks, which is going to be the MetalGarurumon deck. So MetalGarurumon is a combo-centric stack-based deck where we're trying to use the fact that it can attack multiple times to be able to OTK the opponent by setting up and lining up a really big combo turn, evolving all the way up our stages and gaining extra attacks for digivolving. Then the deck does have a purple base, but I think with all of the limitations that the deck has as one of the most limited decks in the game, purple base isn't necessarily the most feasible, and blue base kind of just has the better cards because it has, well, more cards that it can replace for what it lost. It does have a couple of noticeable weaknesses, one being it is a stack-based deck, which naturally comes with inconsistencies, but because of how limited some of the cards got in this deck, we are running a bunch of one-ofs, and that can kind of be hard to find at times, especially if we need that to be able to close out games. The protection also isn't perfect, considering the protection is only battle-related, so any card effects that are able to remove our Digimon still can easily remove our Digimon and ignore what our protection is, while this deck also is kind of an OTK deck, where if we don't find our cards in time, and if we don't line up the right combo, then we can make some suboptimal stacks and make our cards less efficient overall. Then lastly, the potential for being walled out by other defensive decks is still real. We aren't necessarily trying to increase our DP a whole lot, and if they do have a good enough defensive Digimon that also has some nice protections, then it's going to be very hard for us to try to get around those. But even in spite of all of the deck's flaws, this is still one of my favorite decks and is still a really powerful and solid deck overall. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile and see what we're working with. So I am going to be running the Bukamon. So Bukamon is the best blue egg, and there's no reason not to run it because it just allows us to have easy access at jamming, making our attacks as safe as we possibly can. If you wanted to, you could still run 4 eggs and run 3 copies of Sunamon, but I still just like having 5 eggs because I could try to raise a little bit more aggressively depending on how I'm going to be approaching the deck. But Sunamon is in here just to try to help DP boost our Digimon to compensate for the lack of jamming. Then when it comes to the level 3s, I'm just going to be running a nice well-rounded Gabumon lineup. So I'm going to be running 4 copies of the BT15 Gabumon because this card is going to be able to give our Digimon blocker, but that's not necessarily what's important when we're moving it out or it's just sitting on our field. The more important part is while we have a Matt Ishida named Tamer on our field, we could use this card to draw a card, which is really decent at triggering some of our abilities like our Sunamon egg while making our deck more consistent. Then speaking of consistency, its inheritable ability is also another way for us to try to draw cards, and this is a really easy card to use because it's just on a simple when attacking ability. Then when it comes to furthering the consistency of the deck, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gabumon. This Gabumon slot is kind of a tech or flex spot and can be whatever Gabumons you feel like you want or whatever rookies you want. I just like making my deck consistent, especially since I do have all of these tech one-ofs. I want to try to find them as best as I can, and this card just helps us look for our Garurumon and Omnimon named cards. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Gabumon X Antibody from BT9. So this is still just a really decent card, again, at adding some extra consistency because it, again, is looking for our Garurumon and Omnimon cards while also looking for our X Antibody option as well. But I am mostly running this card just because we do still want an X Antibody Digimon to digivolve into, and unfortunately the best one that we have, which is the EX5 Gabumon X, is limited to 1. So Gabumon from EX5 is just better because it has a nice ability to dig deeper and add more potential cards for the low cost of discarding a card after we reveal the top 4 and add 2 with Garurumon Garurumon or X Antibody in their names from among them. Then, on top of that, it even has an inheritable ability, which the old one doesn't have, which adds some extra protection for the deck, allowing our Digimon with Garurumon or Omnimon in its name to not be deleted by battle by returning 2 non-Digi-Egg cards from our trash to the bottom of our deck, which is really decent at helping keep our Digimon around. Then, when it comes to the level 4s, I'm going to be running a all Garurumon lineup. Shocker, right? So I'm going to be running 4 copies of the promo Garurumon because there's still no reason not to run this card. It's cheaper play cost, helps us in case we're stuck and we don't necessarily see a rookie, but the draw for its inheritable ability is just absolutely unmatched, especially if we're trying to attack as much as possible, because its when attacking ability is not limited to once per turn. A lot of our higher stage Digimons are Garurumon named cards, and it's just helping us draw an additional card every attack. And then I'm going to be running 2 copies of the EX1 Garurumon. So we don't really have what a lot of decks do have, which is a Digimon that can actually play our Tamers efficiently when we Digivolve up into it, but this is just the next best thing, where when we attack as a nice inheritable, we get to, once per turn, play out a 3-costed Matt Ishida Tamer from our hand for free, which still helps us be able to set up our Tamer to do whatever we need with our Tamers. Then, on top of that, I'm going to be running 3 copies of the Garurumon X Antibody from BT9. This is a pretty decent card, again, because we still like the X Antibody cards because they're really strong, and this has a nice protection ability to be able to, during all turns, not limited to once per turn, have our Garurumon and Omnimon named cards be protected by battle by trashing 2 cards of the same level from its Digivolution source to prevent that deletion. Again, it's kind of filling that similar role of what the EX5 version is doing, but the EX5 version is unfortunately limited to 1, so again, we just have to flesh out the rest of our X Antibody slots with the only other one that we have. But Garurumon X Antibody from EX5 is still just the better one to use because it has a when digivolving ability to increase the consistency of our deck, allowing us to draw 2 and discard 2, and then if we have Garurumon or X Antibody in its Digivolution source, we also get to gain a memory, gaining tempo when we're digivolving on top of our Garurumons. Then it also has a nice inheritable ability that's doing the exact same thing as the Gabumon X Antibody from EX5, having multiple instances of this protection. Then, when it comes to the level 5s, I'm going to be running 1 copy of the Promo Garurumon. So, the Promo Garurumon is another card that is so strong that it did get limited to 1, so that's why we can only run 1 copy of it. But the reason why it got limited to 1 is just because it's a really solid card at helping with the overall aggression of the deck, because its when attacking ability is borderline free in terms of being able to get an unsuspend, because it just can unsuspend as long as it has a Garurumon card in its Digivolution source when it attacks. Then, on top of that, what's pushing this card over the edge is the fact that its inheritable ability, while we have 8 or more cards in our hand, gives our Digimon Security Attack Plus. So, if we could hit multiple times with Security Attack Plus, we could very easily wipe out a lot of the opponent's security, if not all of their security, in one fell swoop with our other higher stage Digimon. But to try to replace and compensate for the lack of Promo Garurumons, that's why I'm going to be running 2 copies of the Starter Deck 16, because it could do something similar enough. It could still Digivolve on top of our Garurumons, so even though it is purple, we could still use it in the deck just fine because of that name-based evolution. Then its when attacking ability is similar to the promos, where we still get to unsuspend. We just have to discard a card from our hand, but because we have so much draw and search power, it's not like discarding a card is that big of a deal. Then its inheritable ability isn't necessarily increasing the damage output, it's increasing the control capabilities, where we get to discard a card from our hands to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, which is really good at just sniping some Digimon that we want to try to remove off of the field. Then when it comes to some more level 5s, all of these level 5s do have the ability to Digivolve on top of our Garurumons. So I'm going to be running 1 copy of the Promo Sagittarius mode because it also counts as a Garurumon, so that way we could use it as a base if we need to digivolve into our X forms in case we don't have the other Garurumons that we want to try to use. Or if we do, then we just get another free Digivolution and a free cycle utilizing this card. Then it also has a nice when digivolving ability itself, where if we have a Tamer in play, we get to bounce 2 of the opponent's level 3 Digimon back into their hand, which is again really nice added control, while also having that same inheritable ability for protection as what we saw with our Garurumon X antibody from BT9. Then you could kind of mix and match whatever Garurumon X antibodies you want to use. I'm just going to be going for a nice 2-2 split because they do have their own good use cases. So I'm going to be running 2 copies of the Garurumon X antibody from BT9 because this is just a slightly cheaper and easier card to use because its when digivolving ability just allows us to unsuspend the Digimon, which is just really easy, super free, and it doesn't really cost us anything to do. Then it has the additional upside of adding some extra removal for the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon if it has Garurumon or X antibody in its Digivolution source. Then on top of that, I'm also going to be running 2 copies of the EX5 version. It's a little bit more expensive to digivolve into, but we still are able to get that unsuspend. This time, it just is going to cost us 2 cards from our hand in order to do that. Then if we have Garurumon or X antibody in its Digivolution source, we get to actually increase the consistency of the deck by allowing us to actually use our trash on grabbing back our Garurumon named or X antibody named cards from our trash into our hand, which is really nice in case we need a particular piece that's in our trash. This is a good way to retrieve it. Then it has even more damage output potential with an inheritable ability versus the BT9 counterpart, where it's a nice when attacking ability. If it has Garurumon or Omnimon in its name, we get to discard a card from our hand to unsuspend that Digimon, allowing us to have even more attacking potential. Then when it comes to the level 6s, I'm going to go for a nice 2-2-2 split on the MetalGarurumons. So I'm going to be running 2 copies of the BT15 MetalGarurumon. So this is a really interesting card because it has a warp potential built into it as long as we have a Matt Ishida Tamer on our field and the opponent has a Digimon with 10,000 DP or more on their field. Then we could have one of our Gabumons digivolve into this card by paying 4 and ignoring the Digivolution requirements to be able to try to catch up as quickly as possible. Then he has his own built-in protection with the Evade ability, while also having a nice when digivolving ability to try to stunlock 3 of the opponent's Digimon and Tamers from suspending, limiting their possible usability. Then on top of that, it has a nice Alterns ability, which is good offensively and defensively, where when this Digimon becomes suspended, we get to unsuspend it. Then on top of that, I'm going to be running 2 copies of MetalGarurumon Ace. So yes, this is another purple card, but it has name-based evolution, so we could basically ignore color for the most part. It's also an Ace Digimon, so we could use it potentially during the opponent's turn, which is really good because we're being hyper-aggressive with our level 5s, and we could try to leave a level 5 on the field and bait them into an Ace play. But what's really important about this card is the fact that it's trying to anti-tempo the opponent if we're using it on their turn because of the Ace mechanic, but if we're using it on our turn, it basically is going to be a free card to evolve into because its when digivolving ability allows us to trash up to 3 cards from our hand and gain a memory for each card we trashed. It has a natural evolution cost of 3, so this basically makes it 0 because we're gaining the memory back that we spent going into this card. Then it has a nice when attacking ability, further increasing the control capabilities of the deck by allowing us to discard a card and delete one of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest level. So if we use this in combination with all of our other removal and bounce tech, then we could try to clear out the opponent's low level Digimon and use this type of ability to hit their higher level Digimon. Then as far as the last level 6 of the deck, I'm going to be running 2 copies of MetalGarurumon X Antibody. So this can go on top of either of our MetalGarurumons because it just cares about the MetalGarurumon name. And on top of that, this is just the best MetalGarurumon that we're going to be using, more so for the offense, which is what I generally lean into. You could think about utilizing the EX5 version, but that's more of a defensive card. It's not helping you win, it's just helping you not lose. But what this card is doing more specifically is the fact that when we Digivolve up into it, we get to unsuspend this Digimon and it gains blocker until the end of the opponent's turn, so we have good offensive and defensive capabilities depending on how much memory we're left with and what positions we're put in. But it also has a nice control ability attached to it that synergizes well enough with that when Digivolving ability, where during your turn, when this Digimon becomes unsuspended, if it has MetalGarurumon or X Antibody in its Digivolution source, then we get to return all of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest level back into their hand. So if they have any Digimon of the same level on the field that is the lowest, that's what it's referring to, and we get to just remove all of them outright. But what we're really trying to do is use our level 6s just to get some extra attacks, extra damage in, so we can line up our level 7s to close out the game with. So as a result, I'm going to be running 1 copy of BT5 Omnimon, just because its 2 when Digivolving abilities of gaining Blitz and unsuspending this Digimon basically means we could use it to get a free attack to try to sneak in that win. But I'm also going to be running 1 copy of the Omnimon X Antibody from BT10, just because it's more removal, so it's just an easy way to remove a threat, while also having a nice when Digivolving ability to throw back a X Antibody or level 6 from its Digivolution source to the bottom of our deck, look at the opponent's security, and trash 1 card among it so we get to take the most threatening thing out of the opponent's security. Most of the time we want to use that on the very last security, so it just doesn't matter what that last security is, and then Omnimon X Antibody can attack for the game at that point. And then when it comes to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of X Antibody. So you could think about playing with the Proto one. I just didn't really find Proto to be super useful because X Antibody from BT9 has better combo potential due to its inheritable ability of allowing our Digimon to Digivolve mid-attack into an X-form Digimon. The added protection, because it also can't be trashed, it could be relevant for keeping your abilities online, while also having the security ability to additionally anti-tempo the opponent, all of which X Antibody Protoform doesn't really do. Then I'm going to be running 3 copies of Mental Training because, well, there's no real reason not to run Mental Training. It's just a really good consistency tool looking at the top 2 cards for any blue card among them. Digimon Tamer option, doesn't matter, and add it into our hands. Then this card could also help with our Digivolutions later on thanks to its delay ability. And then the last option could kind of just be whatever you want. I'm just going to be running 1 copy of Ice Wall because, well, it is just another card that is limited to 1. So it's really good at trying to stall out the opponent, especially if they have lots of attacking potential, because they're going to lose 2 memory every attack that they can make, while this card also out of security has the anti-tempo potential on making them lose 2 memory because we're gaining that 2 memory. Then when it comes to the Tamers, I'm just going to be keeping it simple and running 2 copies of Cool Boy because we're still playing a lot of X Antibody cards, and this is just another cheap consistency tool looking for our X Antibody Digimon and our X Antibody option. Then when we're Digivolving up into our X Antibody cards off of the same level, it's also going to be helping us gain a memory and draw a card for extra resource generation. Then I'm also going to be running 4 copies of the BT15 Mat Ishida as the only other Tamer, because this card is just really good at, again, being another consistency tool, looking for our Gabumon and Garurumon based cards, while also having the ability to gain us memory when cards are being added into our hand, which this card does see itself do, but we also can use this on our subsequent turns because we have so much draw power in the deck. But that's pretty much it for my interpretation of the deck, and I think that the deck is still a really viable deck and really fun to play with a decent amount of customization based on the tools that you have access to and how you want to play and approach the deck, and the meta that you're going to be wanting to play this into as well. So we do have other useful tools that we could lean into. The majority of them are just going to be the other Gabumon and Garurumon based cards, but we do have a plethora of other solid blue removal options, as well as other good tempo and consistency tools, as well as other Omnimons that we could think about playing. Again, it just depends on what you have access to and what you want to be using. And then as far as some potential future upgrades, we do know that we are getting a new Garurumon line inside of BT17. I don't know if that's going to exactly support this, considering it is more based around Omnimon, but it's still something that we could think about utilizing and incorporating into the deck, depending on what those cards are going to be doing for us, and how we could figure out how to better utilize them to enhance what Melga is already trying to do.